Okay, so let's unpack this. We have all been there. It's that specific time of year, usually mid-February.
Oh, yeah?
The shiny newness of January 1st has completely worn off. You
Yeah.
look at the calendar, you look at your life, and you realize you're pretty much exactly where you were last year.
The dreaded February slump. It's like statistically the graveyard of New Year's resolutions.
It is. And you think, okay, next year, 2026, that's going to be the turnaround year.
Yeah.
But that brings up the big question we're tackling today.
Right.
How do people actually change their trajectory? Is turnaround just luck? Is it just, hoping the universe or God smiles on you? Or is there an actual system?
Like a set of protocols.
Exactly. A set of protocols you can run to guarantee a shift.
It's the search for the source code, really. Can you rewrite the program of your life?
Exactly. And to answer that, we're diving into a really fascinating piece of source material today. We're looking at a sermon by Apostle Joshua Selman titled, "Stop Fasting Blindly."
Now, I know what some listeners might be thinking.
Oh, for sure. A sermon. Are we going to church?
Valid question. But hold on, because Selman, he isn't your typical fire and brimstone preacher.
No, not at all. That's what struck me immediately. Reading through this transcript, he sounds less like a traditional theologian and more like a high-level performance strategist.
Yes. He treats spiritual power almost like a physics problem or an administrative task.
It really is administrative.
Uh-huh.
He's arguing that power, whether that's spiritual influence, healing, or just the capacity to get things done in business, isn't accidental.
It's the result of specific protocols.
Yes, involving the body, the mind, and your relationships. He lays out 3 platforms for accessing power.
And that's our mission, right.
Our mission today is to decode those 3 platforms, because whether you're deeply religious or just obsessed with how high performers build capacity, this framework is fascinating.
It's about discipline, knowledge, and mentorship, but with a very specific, almost counterintuitive twist.
It connects to that whole idea of capacity building. You can't just ask for a big result, a gallon-sized blessing,
Not if you've only built a pint-sized container. Selman is very big on that.
So let's jump into the first platform. And this is the one that's right in the title of the talk, fasting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, usually when I hear about fasting in a productivity context, we're talking about biohacking, intermittent fasting, autophagy, mental clarity.
Right, the whole Silicon Valley approach.
Exactly. But Selman is coming at this from a completely different angle. He establishes right away that he's talking about accessing power.
Not just feeling good.
No, but the ability to affect change, healing, shifting destinies, breaking patterns.
And this is where he brings in a really, really critical distinction. He starts by analyzing Luke chapter 4 in the Bible.
Oh, this was such a great catch.
It's a detail that, honestly, I think 99% of people just skim right over.
I had to go back and check the text myself. Walk us through the specific detail he highlights.
So, okay, looking at the text. Verse 1 describes Jesus before he goes into the wilderness. It says he was full of the Spirit.
So the tank is full.
The tank is full. He has the Holy Spirit. He is, after all, Jesus.
Right. He's already divine. He's already full.
But, and this is Selman's whole point, it wasn't until verse 14, after 40 days of severe fasting and testing, that the text says he returned in the power of the Spirit.
That is such a subtle, but wow, a massive difference. Being full of the Spirit versus moving in the power of the Spirit.
Exactly. Selman argues that the presence of the Spirit and the power of the Spirit are treated as 2 different things.
So you can have the presence, you can be a good person, feel the goosebumps during worship.
But that isn't the same as having the kinetic energy to actually change reality.
And the bridge between presence and power, in his view, is this intense discipline of fasting.
Yes. But, and here's the kicker, he is incredibly critical of how modern people actually fast. He calls it the starvation trap.
He does. He basically implies most people are just dieting and calling it spiritual.
I mean, he says if you're abstaining from food but you aren't engaging in prayer, you aren't studying,
You aren't worshiping.
then you're just on a hunger strike. You're just punishing yourself.
He had that really funny bit about the tom-tom. I actually laughed out loud at that part.
It was hilarious but also so cutting. For those who don't know, Tom-Tom is a strong menthol candy, and Zobo is a local drink.
And he was mocking people who try to cheat their way through a fast, looking for loopholes.
Right. The people who are counting down the seconds until 6 p.m., or they pop a candy to keep their sugar up and think, well, it's not a meal.
So technically, I'm still fasting.
His point is, if you are negotiating with your appetite, you are missing the entire point. He says fasting is about taming the appetite.
A discipline of the body.
Yes. You are teaching your flesh that it is not in charge. If you're using TomTom to get by, the flesh is still winning.
He used a really good analogy for why this matters, the bank account analogy. This took it from like a mystical ritual to an economic transaction for me.
This frames it perfectly. He says, imagine you want to buy a massive estate, a mansion. You walk into the bank ready to sign the papers, but you check your bank account and you have 1,000 naira, which is, a couple of dollars.
You were definitely not getting that estate.
You're not. And you can't go to the bank manager and scream, but I really want it, or I'm a nice person. The currency isn't there.
And he applies this to spiritual results.
Exactly. He says people want to buy national impact or healing for a terminal disease or a massive destiny, but their prayer account is empty.
So fasting isn't about suffering to impress God. It's about making a deposit.
It's an enlargement of capacity. That's the phrase he keeps using. He says you have to become a slave to that dimension of power so it becomes consistent.
So it stops being a one-off miracle that surprises you?
And starts being a predictable outcome because you've paid the price in discipline.
I love that idea of predictable outcomes. But then he pivots. And this is where I think he surprises people who are just looking for a spiritual fix. Because usually when you hear about spiritual power, you think about intuition or feelings. But Selman moves to the second platform, intelligence.
This is my favorite part of his argument. He calls it light or understanding. But really, he's talking about intellect and competence. He is incredibly hard on ignorance.
He really is. He quotes Proverbs, "The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the promotion of fools."
I mean, he's arguing that you cannot walk in power if you are ignorant. It doesn't matter how much you pray.
It doesn't matter if your prayer account is overflowing.
No. If you don't know how things work, you will fail.
He gave a very practical example that I think anyone can relate to, the cooking example. This felt like a scene from a movie.
It's a great scenario about destiny helpers. So imagine you've been praying for a breakthrough. You need funding for your business, a connection for your career.
You've been fasting, your prayer account is full, so God answers.
God answers by sending a person, a helper.
Maybe it's a high-ranking CEO or a respected elder, someone who actually holds the keys.
Exactly. So the prayer worked. The person is sitting in your living room. But
you don't know how to cook.
Or you lack basic courtesy. You don't know how to host someone of that caliber. You offer them nothing, or maybe just a cup of warm water in a dirty glass.
You interrupt them. You're disrespectful because you lack social intelligence.
You're treating a VIP like they're your buddy from down the street.
So what happens?
The helper leaves. They leave early. The check isn't written. The recommendation isn't made. The miracle is lost.
And Selman's analysis of this is just brutal.
It is. He points out, the prayer worked. The spiritual side did its job perfectly. The helper arrived. But your lack of wisdom,
your lack of practical skill,
ruined the outcome.
That is such a heavy realization. It's like you can't pray away incompetence.
Precisely. He says, God doesn't bless foolishness. And he warns the younger generation specifically. He says a lazy generation wants impartation. They want the magic touch.
The laying on of hands.
Without the hard work of learning.
He was very specific about what to learn, too. It wasn't just read the Bible.
No, this was a comprehensive curriculum. He said, go online, buy books, learn administration, learn leadership, learn people skills.
Right.
He said, even if you're anointed, if you can heal the sick, if you have an empty and dull head, leaders of corporations won't listen to you.
An empty and dull head.
Wow.
He does not pull his punches.
He really doesn't. He emphasizes that the people you want to influence, business leaders, decision makers, they're intelligent people.
They respect competence.
Yes. They will not submit to leadership that lacks intellectual capacity. So his equation for power is spiritual intensity plus intellectual excellence.
So we have the body, fasting, and the mind, intelligence, which brings us to the third platform. And this one feels like the accelerator. It's almost a cheat code in his system.
It sort of is, yeah. This is the platform of alignment and mentorship, or as he calls it, encounter through connection.
He used a visual here that immediately stuck in my head. The shower analogy?
It's so vivid, isn't it? He asks the audience, when you stand under a shower, does your leg have to stretch all the way up to the nozzle to get wet?
No, obviously not. The water hits your head and it flows down.
Right. As long as the leg is connected to the body, the water that hits the head eventually reaches the feet. The leg doesn't have to be tall, it just has to be connected.
So decoding that metaphor, the head is someone who has a standing with God.
Exactly. He talks about people who are friends of God. Not just children of God, because all believers are children, but people who have a track record, a history, a covenant.
So if you align with them.
He argues that if you align yourself with someone like that, you can experience results that your own spiritual maturity hasn't earned yet.
You get wet without being tall enough to reach the shower head.
In a sense, yes, it's a system of advantage. But he makes a really important distinction here between being a fan and being a connector.
Oh, right. There is no inheritance for fans. That's a line that belongs on a t-shirt.
It just cuts through the whole social media culture we live in. He says just liking a leader, following them online, retweeting their quotes.
That is an alignment.
That's just fandom. He says alignment requires understanding and honor. He uses the example of Elisha and Elijah from the Old Testament.
Elisha was the successor to the prophet Elijah, and he ended up with double the power.
Yes. But Selman asks, how did he get it? He didn't just attend Elijah's conferences. The scripture says Elisha poured water on Elijah's hands.
Which is a cultural idiom for service.
He served him. He was close enough to observe the private life, not just the public performance.
He also mentioned the disciples in the New Testament. This was a theological detail I hadn't thought about before, and it kind of blew my mind.
It's a fascinating point. He notes that the disciples were casting out demons and healing the sick before Jesus died and resurrected.
Which technically means?
Technically, they weren't born again in the Christian sense yet. The Holy Spirit hadn't come down at Pentecost to live inside them.
So they were operating on the old OS.
Right. So how were they doing miracles? How were they driving out darkness?
It had to be the connection.
Selman argues it was entirely because they were under Jesus's cover. They were operating on his credit. They were using his corporate card.
Wow. So the third platform is basically leveraging someone else's credit rating while you build your own.
That's a perfect way to put it. But he does warn that it's not a replacement for personal growth. It's a bridge.
You eventually have to grow up.
Exactly. But while you are growing, alignment keeps you safe and gives you results you couldn't get on your own. It accelerates your process.
So we have these three platforms: discipline, intelligence, alignment. But running underneath all of this, there was a mindset shift that he kept pushing for.
Yeah.
And honestly, for a sermon, it sounded surprisingly self-assured.
You're talking about the confidence section.
Yes. There was this moment where he stops and says, I believe in Jesus, but let me tell you sincerely, I believe in myself too.
It's a jarring statement in a religious context where you're usually taught to deny yourself, to say, I am nothing. But Selman argues that false humility is dangerous. He believes you must have a conviction that you are loved and chosen. If you don't believe in yourself, you won't have the confidence to face nations or demons or even just difficult business problems.
He actually forced the audience to make a declaration. He made them say, I am a blessing.
And he applied it to everyone. Doctors, spouses, business people. The core idea is identity. You have to see yourself as a solution provider.
He gave that scenario about money. He said, even if someone asks you for money and you're broke, you don't just say, sorry, I can't help.
Right. That part was really about shifting how you see your own value. He says, recognize what you do carry.
You might not have cash.
You might not have cash in your pocket, but you have prayer, you have counsel, you have wisdom, you have access to peace. If you view yourself as a blessing, you always have something to offer.
You're never just a helpless observer.
Exactly. It empowers you. You aren't just waiting for God to do something. You are acknowledging that God has put something in you to be delivered to the world.
Now, as he wrapped up the talk, he dropped one final concept that I thought was really beautiful. He talked about peace as a weapon.
Yes. This was the cool down after all that intense talk about fasting and power.
And he defined peace not as the absence of trouble.
Because if you're doing big things, there will be trouble. He defined it as the presence of God in the storm.
Protect your peace.
He advised the listeners to be ruthless about this. If a conversation drains your peace, step back. If a relationship costs you your peace, let it go.
Peace is too expensive to waste.
I love that line.
It fits with the whole economic theme he seemed to have. Prayer accounts, investing in knowledge, peace being expensive.
It does. It all comes back to resource management. Managing your spiritual energy, your mental capacity, your emotional stability.
So let's bring this all together. We started by asking if there's a system for a turnaround. And Selman's answer seems to be a resounding yes.
It is a system. It's not just wishing, it's a tripod.
Let's recap the tripod.
First, you have the physical discipline, fasting and prayer. That's about building the energy and the capacity to handle power. It's the battery pack.
Okay.
Second, the mental discipline, intelligence, and wisdom. That's about having the software to run the hardware.
You need to know how to cook for the destiny helper.
You do. And third, the relational discipline, alignment, and honor. Connecting with those who are ahead of you to accelerate your journey.
It's a holistic framework. It's not just pray more, it's become more.
Become more, that's the key. Power isn't a gift you receive, it's a dimension you grow into.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive so useful, even if you aren't preparing for a church service. If you look at your own life and you feel stuck, you can audit yourself against these 3 platforms.
It's a fantastic diagnostic tool. You can ask yourself, am I disciplined in my body? Am I learning new things and updating my mental software? Who am I aligned with?
And looking back at that cooking example, if you have the spiritual connection but lack the social skills, you might realize that your failed prayer was actually just a lack of preparation.
That's the thought that keeps you up at night. But it's also the thought that gives you the roadmap to fix it.
Absolutely. Selman suggests that power is actually a mix of spiritual intensity and practical competence. If you want the turnaround in 2026, you need both.
You really do. You can't fly on one wing.
Well, that's it for this deep dive. We hope this helps you structure your own turnaround, whether it's for 2026 or just next Tuesday. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.